taken from among men and appointed by God. Hebrews 5:1, for every priest taken from among men is ordained for men and things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins, who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way, for that he himself is also encompassed with infirmity. And by reason thereof he ought to, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer for sins. Remember, in the Old Testament, anyone who wanted to approach God or partake of their inheritance had to have an offering for sin. There were so many sins, sins of omission, transgressions, iniquity. All these things had to be covered with blood. So they had a priest taken from among them. The reason he had to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins was because he was one of them. He himself is encompassed by infirmity. In the Old Testament, the priest was a sinful human being, no different than anyone else. However, he was qualified by his procedure and his garments. He had a procedure to put on the garments and enter in within the veil and offer up the blood. So God responded with his presence. Here, our Christ is higher because he was without sin, and yet he can still relate because he was tempted in so many ways like us. He knows the temptation by hunger. He knows the temptation of wanting to shirk back. Remember Gethsemane, if there's any way this cup can pass from me. He knows what it's like to be surrounded by enemies and offended continually, and what it's like to overcome. On the one hand, he was tempted, but what he had that we did not have is that he is the Son of God, given the Spirit without measure, John 3:34, and the divine life responded. We have the divine life and are regenerated, but we also have a sin nature, and the two are at war, Galatians 5:17. Until we are transformed, we will not be like the Son of God in all of our responses. Often our flesh will respond, and then through his redemption, our spirit will come out too, slaying the flesh, and then being released in righteousness to deal with the situation. He didn't respond that way. He responded properly every single time. He still does. But we are a mixture and need a high priest. This is Christ, who offered himself once for all for our sins. He can have compassion on the ignorant and those who are out of the way because he knows weakness. The Old Testament priest had to offer sins for the people and for himself. Christ identified with us by becoming sin. While he did not sin, he became sin, and his blood covered it all because he was righteous. Hebrews 5:4, and no man takes this honor unto himself, but he that is called of God, as was Aaron. So also Christ glorified not himself to be made a high priest, but he that said to him, Thou art my son, today I have begotten thee. As he's also said in another place, Thou art a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. Sometimes we read 1 John 2:2. I write these things that you might not sin. But anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. We think that somehow Jesus is guarding us from the judgment of God. But he is an advocate with the Father. Both of them are advocating for us, and this is proven here because the Father is the one who appointed Christ as our high priest. Jesus didn't choose that on his own. God sent him to do this. This is why he was sent, to give his life for us. He does it in obedience to the Father. So the Father is for us, and so is Christ. They are one person, the triune God. They are not in disagreement about us. Christ is not hiding us from the judgment of the Father. He is delivering the salvation that the Father sent him to deliver to the people he chose who were to believe in him. He said, The Father loves me because I give my life for the sheep. John 10:17.